Good to be here. Always good to be here. Welcome to a brand new episode of Matt's Art Chat. I'm Matt Micucci, and this is my weekly series of podcast conversations about the arts with creators, curators, and art lovers from all over the world. My guest today is painter ANIA HOBSON, who is really a rising star in the British and international art scene. She's got a very unique and distinctive and fresh figurative style and aesthetic style. For example, one of the things that I love about her artwork is her use of color. Another thing that I love about it is her perspectives, which aren't very traditional or conventional. And again, these are two things that actually show that rather than being traditional and conventional, she tries new things. She's got a very fresh approach. In fact, one of the things that her works have been praised for is their modern vibes. And for example, they have actually been, some of them have been referred to in terms of the representation of women as celebration of modern woman. So we get into that in the conversation. I don't want to give too much away, also because I try to keep these introductions as short as possible to prevent me from rambling on. But it was a really interesting conversation, and I should say that Anya is preparing to launch her debut solo exhibition at the Cato Gallery in London. That's CATTO. And that will be launched on the 5th of September. So if you are in the vicinities, I do suggest checking out these artworks, as I say, in the flesh. I believe the exhibition will run to the 23rd of September. And the reason why I know that is because that's also my birthday, which doesn't really mean anything. I'm not a big birthday guy, you know, especially when you get to my age, which is 152. But excellent conversation, and I'm delighted that you tuned in to listen to it. I want to take a few seconds. This is a kind of a landmark episode, especially because it's the 30th episode of the series. It doesn't seem like a lot, but to me it means that for 30 weeks I've been able to deliver a different episode of Matt's Art Chat, which is a totally self-produced and series. You know, I do it on my free time. It's really a labor of love, and I'm very thankful for anybody who sort of let me record a conversation with them, just took the time to let me do that. And what I've done throughout the series is I've tried to kind of represent a varied range of art forms. So when I say arts, I obviously don't just mean painting and sculpture. I also mean photography, film, music, writing. I even interviewed an interior designer, architecture, you name it. And I've really tried to have a very, very wide range of people representing all of the arts. I've also tried to interview people from different cultural backgrounds, because I do believe that the future of the arts is obviously all-inclusive. And I don't want to get too stuck into this, but I will say this, that I've decided to take a pause, to take a break, for a couple of reasons that I'm not going to get into here. But I will record a video about it and post that on my YouTube channel. And I'll leave it at that, because it's not really about me or necessarily about this series right now. It's about the conversation with Anya, which was a fascinating one, and I hope you will enjoy it. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hi, Anya. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great, thank you.
This is a real treat. So where in the world are you right now?
I am based in Suffolk. It's just sort of outside of London, about an hour and a half. Sort of a small county, but very, very beautiful.
You know, these are crazy times that we're living in. So I'm in Italy, so I'm in a different part of the world, and I just kind of like to ask people at this moment in time how they're sort of dealing with the situation. I mean, is it affecting your creativity, your work output in any way?
I think at the beginning, it definitely affected my creativity. I think the whole thing was quite overwhelming. I got more sort of sucked into reading the news and hearing about, how the world was dealing with this. And it definitely sort of stopped me creating a bit. And obviously during lockdown as well, you are sort of in your home, and I couldn't go to the studio as well. So yeah, I found that quite difficult, I think, at the beginning, definitely.
And would you say that you normally would have like a work routine that you stick to under normal
Yeah,
circumstances, let's say?
yeah, I definitely did. I think I'd sort of say to myself, at this time I'm going to go to the studio and then I'll come back at this time. And yeah, so that all stopped. And yeah, it was trying to find a way of painting at home, which for me, I couldn't really get comfortable with, because a home for me is a relaxation place. It's where you let your emotions out and you relax. So to bring work into that was actually very difficult. It and with everything that's gone on, it became quite overwhelming, and it did definitely stunt everything that I was doing. It just put a stop to it for a little bit. But yeah, it was getting my head around that. So I found it quite hard. Yeah.
I find it interesting what you just said there, actually, about your home being a sort of a safe space. Are you able to
Yeah.
sort of take that time for yourself, aside from the work that you do, perhaps in your studio?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when I'm at home, you're sort of thinking about things and the next plan. And the studio, I guess it's the same for me as well. I would go there to relax also. But just to have one of those taken away, it definitely, yeah,
Hmm.
sort of throw things around a bit. And yeah.
So these are exciting times for you as you look set to debut your first London solo exhibition at the Cato Gallery on the 5th of
Yes.
September. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. 5th of September to the 23rd.
Which is my birthday, by the way.
Oh, great.
Just throwing that out there. But
Yep.
anyways, for no reason at all. But we'll be talking about that a little later. I'm very curious to find out what works will be shown at this particular exhibition. But in my art chat, I kind of, these are very laid back affairs, and I like to take this opportunity to find out more about the people I talk with. And this is the first time we talk. So this is kind of the question that I like to ask. And feel free to answer this question in any way you like, and then we'll see where we go from there. But
Yeah.
do you remember when it was that you decided that you wanted to be an artist, or maybe you became interested in the arts?
Um, yeah, I think, I mean, I'd always been into drawing, and it's something that started from such a young age. And both my brother and my sister were big into drawing. My parents were both very creative. So it's sort of been there from a very young age. But I probably thought maybe after university, I thought I wanted to take it professionally, but I never really said to myself before that I wanted to take it further. So there was a point, I think, after university that I thought I do want to take this further, and how do I do that? So yeah, I God, I can't remember how many years ago uni was now. So yeah, that seems like a long time ago, but yeah, it's
Right.
definitely sort of built up to that. Yeah.
Was it a difficult decision for you to make in terms of like just pursuing a career in the arts professionally? Did you have the support of your family? Because for some people, for a lot of
Mm.
people, it is kind of a difficult decision to make for those reasons.
Yes, I mean, when you say to people, I want to be a painter and do that full time, they do sort of raise an eyebrow, think, is that easy? And it's not easy at all. So to start that, there's so much planning that has to be put into that, and my family were very supportive of it because they're very creative people. So that was great that I had their support and their help at the beginning as well. So you sort of have to think ahead of things a lot. And I had a small time job as well, which um, I'd waitress in a pub, and that would sort of, I'd be a little bit of money to help with my work. And it's just about it's like a snowball effect. You've just got to keep that ball rolling. And if you stop, you can very quickly sort of let things go. So it is a matter of just actually determination and how much you want it.
Right. Yeah. You have to tell yourself this is what you want to do. And at
Yeah.
some point, you also have to sort of become convinced that you are an artist. So you have to take the time to do it.
Yes, yeah, and it's so competitive anyway. So
Mm.
in a way that, you have to, some people can deal with that and some people can't, and they give up because it is so competitive. But some people, they like the challenge, and I think you've got to see it as a challenge, and trying to get yourself known and do something different. So you're constantly challenging yourself as a person. It's not necessarily about artwork. I always found being trying to pursue a career in being an artist, I've found a lot about myself. Yeah, it's quite strange.
Right. That's interesting, and it's probably a point that I will want to get back to later on. But just thinking about your very early days drawing or painting, even as a child, do you remember whether there were specific things that you drew or that you represented with your drawings or paintings as a child? In your early age.
Yes, so a lot of it was animals, and that was because my mum had a small holding um, at my parents' house when I lived there. So she had a lot of goats, chickens, dogs. Yeah, so she had quite a few animals sort of um, in the garden. So that was just actually my starting thing, was just sitting in the garden, drawing the animals from life.
Mm.
And so that was sort of my first subject, was more animal based. And I did draw a lot of people as well, but it was more I love animals in general, so it was just the first thing that I started drawing. Yeah.
Do you remember who were sort of the first famous painters that you became aware of?
Yeah, I was really big on Lucian Freud,
Mm.
and I just use his paint. It was more about the technique that he was doing. So I was quite, yeah, obsessed with Lucian Freud and researching. So I think he was the first artist that I definitely looked at and researched, and that was purely just from the texture of his work.
Yeah. What was it about his technique that you liked?
It was just how he was applying the paint, and actually he's in colors and getting them so right and perfect, and just there were colors in there that you wouldn't think to use for skin, so it'd be like greens and blues, and when people think of flesh tones they just think pink, or just brown. And yeah, it just, there's a lot more to it, and I think that's what really fascinated me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just looking at your works now, I mean, do you feel like that sort of perhaps not him directly, but that idea of using these types of colors or even perhaps exaggerating certain things in the representation of your subject
Mm.
influences your work now?
Yes, I think it still yeah, definitely sort of mirrors into my work a little bit. I think actually, yeah, how I paint the skin it definitely reflects actually what I've been looking at in Lucian's work.
Right. And what is the thought behind that aside from the aesthetics itself? Is there some perhaps philosophy behind using this particular technique?
I think I really enjoy actually just the process of paint. So I don't like a flat image when it comes to skin. I kind of enjoy using paint, almost like sculpting with something. So it's like molding the shape of how a cheek can move, or how the forehead is, round, and there's all the contours of the face. And I think using thick paint really helps to amplify that in my work. Yeah.
So earlier we talked about the fact that animals were among the first things that you
Mm.
painted, and that sort of, you like to represent. So looking at your works now, though, I think one of the themes that is very prevalent in your works is the gender theme. Would I be
Mm.
right in saying that?
Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah.
So again, just going back to perhaps the origins of your interest in that, do you remember whether as a child you became aware of perhaps structures in place that define gender within society?
Yeah, I actually remember there was one article that I was reading, and I was just doing the usual research on just artists and paintings, and they were always labeling the artist as a he. And
Yeah.
I always actually remember thinking, um, not slightly embarrassed by, oh, is it just males that paint? So why? I actually, yeah, that always sort of pops into my mind. And now I'm a lot older, and you become aware of this. I think, yeah, back then it definitely sort of gave me a strange feeling when I'd read these articles and they were labeling the artist as a he, and it just
Yeah, yeah.
something I was aware of, I think, yeah.
What about the way in which women were represented in art that is, celebrated, so to speak? Was that something else that you sort of became aware of as well?
Yeah, especially when you go around galleries and women are painted in this sort of damsel in distress way, and they look a little lost and they're just seen as beautiful creatures. I think that definitely made me want to paint women in a strong, assertive way, and they know what they're thinking and they're not lost, you know. So I think that does come out in my work now. And yeah, it's just more of the Renaissance paintings and in museums. There's just
Yeah.
sort of a lot of women are just used as muses and models, and you don't see many men, you know, painting, painted in the nude, or it was mainly women. And yeah, so I think I like to change that.
And do you find that still sort of the predominant way in which women are represented, not just in painting, but
Mm.
in the world at large, I would say?
I think a tiny bit, yeah, it's still obviously happening, but I think things are changing
Mm.
now. I think a wave of, you know, women's roles and how they're played in the world is definitely being pushed out there. And the same with women artists, the same with musicians, and it's just everything in general. I think it is like this big wave that is just, yeah, definitely. Mm.
You mentioned that you like to represent women as strong and independent. Maybe I
Mm.
am paraphrasing, but I'd love to know a little bit more about that. I mean, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I paint a lot of my women in a very they're feminine, but they can be quite sort of, with what they're wearing, it's not feminine. So they're in a lot of big jackets, and it just shows, I think, structure, and it comes across almost quite masculine. And yeah, so I think fashion plays a lot into it as well, in what they're wearing, just to help make a statement.
Right. And,
Yeah.
just to make perhaps a specific example, 2 years ago, and correct me if I'm saying anything that's not right here, but 2 years ago, you won the Young Artist Prize at the
Yes.
BP Portrait Awards at the National Portrait Gallery with a
Yeah.
portrait of two female painters. Can you tell me maybe a little bit about this particular work and how perhaps it illustrates what you just referred to?
Yeah. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I just wanted to represent two women artists, and it was just showing them in, the clothes that we paint in, and I wanted it to come across as quite strong. And yeah, it's just sort of referencing two strong women. We know what we're doing, and that we're in the art world, which was very male based, which still can sometimes be very male based. And I just wanted that. I wanted to make it quite a big painting as well, to make it quite of a statement. And with the shoe coming forward, it's quite in your face. And I think it's me in the painting with my sister-in-law, and I'm looking directly out. And I wanted it to come across not intimidating, but a bit sort of standoffish.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and just sort of painting again. The clothes really play into it as well. Yeah.
So that's you in the painting.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Now, what was why did you decide to put yourself in that particular painting?
I paint quite a lot of self-portraits in
Oh,
general, so I just wanted to, use myself. And it was because it was for the BP Portrait Awards, the deadline was really creeping up. So to get a painting done in time, I thought, I know what I want to do and how to go about this. So to make time a little quicker, I thought I'd use myself and my sister-in-law, who shares the same studio. So sort of,
oh, right.
yeah, she sort of helped,
So,
pose
so,
for the painting. Yeah.
so it was also a practical decision.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, there was that as well.
So just looking at this painting, another of your works, and I have read that you actually said this, that you paint from really high to really low perspectives, and occasionally you will do, and only occasionally you will do a front portrait. Any particular reason for that?
Yeah, I think when I paint a painting, a lot of it is about angles and perspective, and I really enjoy that. And I think you can really enhance somebody's features, whether it's three quarters or side on. But front on, I mean, I did a painting that very recently, just front on, and I slightly struggled with it, and I don't know why. But I think I just enjoy exaggerating features. That's probably what it is. Is that,
Mm.
yeah,
Where do you think that comes from? Is there an influence from perhaps any other artworks? Because I'm thinking of cinema, for example.
I don't know if it was influenced by anything. I think it's just how I felt comfortable portraying my figures. I think a lot of it is actually probably about not being so realistic with my faces. I like to exaggerate the features, so that probably helps me. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay, yeah. So
mm,
it goes with what you were saying earlier about sort of exaggerating certain features and
yes,
perhaps countering
yeah,
another. Because realism itself is a very problematic term, I find.
mm, yeah. I think you're painting. I try to steer away from painting something so hyper realistic. I'm very much. I don't really, and I can appreciate a hyper realistic painting purely for just how much effort, and actually it's an incredible skill to have. But for me, it's a lot about actually enjoying the movement of paint and the fluidity and the freedom that you can have in painting, and that's really important for me. And so I try to not be so realistic with my features and my people.
And just taking the angles, the specific perspectives in your works, I mean, is that also, I guess, a way to counter a certain traditionalist way, not only of making art, but also of looking at art?
Yeah, I think a lot of art is actually is some people can look at art and they like the movement or the shapes that, or it could be just the colors. So for me, a lot of, if I look at a painting of another artist, I can really enjoy the painting purely because of the shapes that it's creating and the colors that they've used. It's sometimes not necessarily about who they're painting or what they're painting. A lot is actually just what how they've put the painting together.
We've covered, your formative years, drawing, and some of the themes that you deal with in your work. I would also be interested in finding out more about exhibiting your work or how you exhibit your work. So, just going back again,
Mm.
do you remember when it was that you first, publicly exhibited your work, and how it made you feel? How that experience made you feel? What was it like?
Yeah, it's such a great feeling and very unnerving at the same time. So it's definitely a mix. Um, I actually can't remember the first time I exhibited, but I remember my end of degree show, and that's open to the public. And it's just, I think it, yeah, that may have been first time maybe showing to a big sort of audience. And then I think actually it's more local based. Yeah, I don't actually remember the first time.
But that end of degree exhibition, what were the works that you were showing to the people?
It was all portraits. It was all actually portraits of my family. And it was the first time that I'd been using oil, so I had any idea how to use oil paint. So it was a lot of it was actually just learning from myself. I I felt maybe with the university I didn't quite get the techniques that I wanted to sort of gain. A lot of it was actually self-taught.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I had a couple of portraits of families and faces, and I remember being very proud of them because to use oil paints, they can be very difficult, and it's quite daunting to use them for the first time because everyone thinks oil paints are so difficult. But they're actually not. And yeah, so again, it was a lot of learning through myself. Yeah.
Speaking of which, what are your favorite materials that you like to work with?
I used to use a palette knife with my painting, but I don't do that anymore. But I really enjoy using sort of hog bristled brushes, which they're quite hard, and they keep the texture of the paint. So when you apply the paint onto the canvas, it can create these really nice brush marks, and that's what I still really enjoy using today. And I remember first using oils, actually just being obsessed with how the you can create a mark and it'll just dry like that, whereas some paints can sort of flatten into the canvas. I just, yeah, that, and I use a lot of mediums mixed into my oil paints, whether to create a sheen or to create a matte um, effect with the paint.
These are choices that help you with the color. The color remains a very important aspect of your works.
Yes, color is very important. I think although my work does change over time, but before I was using very monochrome, sort of dark, dusty colors, very black and brown, a lot of black and brown actually. But now I find that I'm enjoying a lot of pinks and reds and deep blues and greens and pink with green, which they clash, but they actually clash in a good way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel that recently my work's been changing, and I'm actually still finding that it does change more and more over time.
And are you aware of that evolution process? Do you let it happen naturally? How does that work? Are you conscious of it?
Yes, I think I like to let things happen naturally because there's been times where I've hit a block with my work and I think I want to change something. I don't know what it is, and you try to experiment, and if it doesn't work, it can get quite frustrating and you feel a bit lost and you try something else. But I've sort of learned from that that I just have to let it naturally happen, and to actually just take a break with painting and just go to galleries and see things and do things, and that's inspiration. And you'll find when you come back that with all this feeding that you've done in your mind, that it can subconsciously actually come out into your work without even realizing, and then you look back and you think, actually, I didn't realize that that's probably the turning point, whereas at the time you're not actually aware of it. It's yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you about is last year we were invited to exhibit at the Venice Biennale in 2019 as part of a group show called Personal Structures Identities. Can you tell me
Yes.
more about that and that experience?
Yeah, it was a. I was invited to take part, and they are an official collateral event of the Venice Biennale. So you've got the main Biennale, and then outside the Biennale, they have all these other art events going on. So that was one of them. It was such a great experience exhibiting during that time, because obviously Venice is just heaving full of people, art collectors, galleries. So to have my work exhibited in the Palazzo during that time, it's just, yeah, it's like such a great feeling, and it was one of the best experiences actually being there, and in Venice obviously as well. So
Yeah, I guess it is a little implied in the name of the group show itself, but can you tell me more about perhaps the theme of this show?
yes, it was called Personal Structures, and it was identities. So there was a lot of photography. There was just a huge mixture of work. I think everyone was just sort of putting in what they wanted to put, and it would be things based on maybe even climate change, or there was a lot of photography work on people, and huge sort of paintings of just abstract paintings, and then you'd get portraits. So there's just a huge variety of work. So it wasn't necessarily a theme. I think people just wanted to put in what they felt they wanted to show at the time. Yeah.
Right. And what was your identity, quote unquote?
I traveled to Paris quite a bit. I went with my cousins and my sister during my first visit, and I went for the whole cafe scene theme. I yeah, so I when I was in Paris, I think cafes, they're so beautiful. They're very authentic. They're peeling walls, wooden tables, and sort of smoke curling around people outside. And I just really enjoyed that whole theme. And so I would get my cousins to sit down, and even if it wasn't posed, I would sort of say, actually, I like this image. I like what's going on. So I'd get them to almost freeze or, change a few things, and I'd take a couple of photos. And that was my thing.
Were you reveling in the romanticism of the Paris cafe scene?
Yes, yeah, there was definitely that as well. You have to emotionally and put in, things like that into your painting. That just comes naturally, yeah.
And so, as mentioned, on the 5th of September, there will be, your London show will be launched, your new London show, your first solo exhibition in London. And it's going to feature new artwork. So what are some of the defining traits of the show? What can you tell me about it?
I think looking back at my previous work, I've changed a lot in my style. And a few people have mentioned this, that they almost say that my paintings are getting a little not weirder. My characters are becoming a bit more sort of not so of I'm trying not to do the standard portrait pose, and I'm trying to make it more into they're doing something, or there's a lot of emotion, which I didn't really do before. And I've tried to also recently generate ideas into my head and just make them up and put it onto canvas, which I've always wanted to do. So I think my work's changed quite a lot. So I'm intrigued to see how people react to it, because it's not something that I've been doing for a while. It's fairly new. Yeah.
What kind of scenes are represented in these works?
So I have a few sort of the standard portraits, but amongst that I'll have so there's one called the Meetup, which is myself and my cousins again, in the park. And when we meet, we're always talking almost over each other a lot of the time, and we're like sisters, so we're very close, and we can argue and we can debate. And behind the whole Meetup, there's starlings flying around, and starlings are actually the birds. They're constantly talking, and they're always in flocks. So I sort of put that in almost like a symbol. So things like that I never really used to do before. And a lot of my figures are maybe talking or doing something. So I want the viewers to connect with an emotion or a feeling that they recognize maybe within themselves, or just anything. Whereas I didn't really do that before. A lot of it was just, working with perspective, which I still do, but I've entwined that into showing a bit more emotion with my work.
And something else that I'm realizing just talking with you, and how you just described that particular painting with the presence of those birds, it's almost like you're going back to those animals that you were drawing earlier in your life, right?
Yes. And my dad was I remember as a child, because he used to paint a lot of he used to live in Africa, so he used to paint a lot of African birds and watercolors. His style is completely different to mine. He's very realistic in what he does, and he uses watercolors, so we're complete opposites of a technique. But I do remember him teaching me how to draw the anatomy of a bird, so it actually does play into what I'm doing now. And I do enjoy painting animals, so I do like to sort of incorporate that into some of my work. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of the scenes that you paint then or represent are from everyday life in a sense. Is there a reason for that?
Again, I think it's just something people that they can relate to, and you have so much to work with on that, and you're not really limiting yourself to finding ideas. It can be the most simplest thing that we do every day, but you can turn it into something quite interesting or put a certain twist to it. So a lot of it is actually, whether it's just walking feet or somebody in a pub with a dog or a restaurant, there you can create your own story with it. Yeah.
And just about the portraits themselves too. That's another thing that it seems like you are sort of interested in working with. Is there anything in particular about portraits that interests you?
Yes, it's a lot of it is just actually about how you can use facial expressions to portray something, how someone's feeling. And with portraits, I don't really tend to paint people smiling for a reason because I think you'll just give smiling is you just whether you're just giving away the emotion. I think it's one emotion that we can all recognize, but when with a portrait, you can actually portray so much more just through the use of how someone's using their hands or how the eyes are looking or how they have their head turned. It can mean so many different things. So again, you're not limiting yourself with portraits. People can identify an expression,
Are
you
these
know.
maybe things that can be represented in a painting perhaps better than photography, let's say?
I think so because with art you can actually exaggerate things. You're not you can change things. You can you know, paint something and a totally sort of heighten that emotion. And yeah, I think you can. I think so, yeah.
So besides painting, do you work with other art forms?
No, I don't. No, I don't think I do. I have actually thought about a lot of people have asked me, do I, make things, whether it's sculpting or um doing something like that. But it has actually come to my mind, but I don't think I'm quite there yet.
No, but it is something
Yeah.
that you would consider doing in the future.
Yes, yeah, I think, I like to let things happen naturally, and I think when I feel like that moment's right, then I'll sort of go forward with it. Yeah.
Right, right. So, Anya, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Thanks very much for doing this. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.